Good afternoon. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Development Panel of Allerdale Borough Council. My name is Lee Jardine. I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and for the purpose of this meeting, I'm also the host. I'll be assisting the committee with the use of technology and to manage the process of the meeting. I won't have any control of the meeting, and the meeting will not begin until instructed by the chair. Before we go on to the meeting, we'll do some introductions, starting with the members. Councillor Armstrong.
Good afternoon. Councillor Carol Armstrong, Harrington Salterbeck Ward Councillor.
Councillor Daniels.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Daniels.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Good afternoon, Councillor Janet Fairbrother.
Councillor Granger.
Good afternoon, Councillor Malcolm Granger.
Councillor Horsley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Daniel Horsley.
Councillor Lynch.
Good afternoon, Councillor Elaine Lynch.
Councillor Mumby.
Good afternoon, Councillor Ron Mumby.
Councillor Semple.
Good afternoon, Councillor Andy Semple.
Councillor Scott.
Good afternoon, Councillor Paul Scott.
Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Smith.
Councillor Tyson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Tyson.
Thank you. Now we'll go over to the officers. Simon Sharp.
Good afternoon, Simon Sharp, Planning and Building Control Manager.
Steve Long.
Good afternoon, Steve Long, Senior Planning Officer.
Sarah Brooke.
Good afternoon, Sarah Brooke, Senior Planning Officer.
And we have a consultant on the meeting today, Anthea Jones.
Good afternoon, Anthea Jones. I'm the agricultural consultant working on behalf of Allerdale Borough Council.
Thank you. And we are just joined by the monitoring officer today, Sharon Sewell. It's just joined the meeting now. So thanks everyone for your introductions. Members, just reminded to keep yourselves on mute unless intending to speak. And if you do intend to speak, please use the raised hand function. So thank you very much. I'll hand you over to the chair to formally start the meeting.
Thank you, Lee. Item 1, apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies today from Councillor Coburn, who's replaced today by Councillor Scott, and Councillor Kirkbride.
Item 2, declaration of interest. Council staff to give notice of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest, or any other interest, and the nature of that interest relating to any item on the agenda in accordance with the adopted code of conduct.
No.
All right. Question 3, item 3, questions. To answer questions from councillors, members of the public, submitted in writing or by electronic mail, no later than 5 p.m. on a working day, allowing 2 clear working days before the day of the meeting.
No questions received, Chair. No.
We'll go now onto the planning issues. And before we go on to item number 4, we have a request for a deferment. Before considering the first application, item 4, you explain that a request has been made for deferral of agenda item number 5 has been received from the applicant. You then, the order be changed and we consider item number 5 first. Over to you, the officers.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. On agenda item 5 for the Section 73 application at Dubbonby Hall, we received a request yesterday from the applicant to defer making a decision on the application today. The reasons being that they've have some concerns about the approach that we've taken to updating the conditions that are still relevant to the original permission and how those have been incorporated into the new Section 73 application. We've been provided with an extension of time to cover that deferral. So the view from officers is that we don't have any issue with the application being deferred if that's acceptable to members. That would give us the opportunity to hear what the concerns are from the applicant in detail and to give those concerns due consideration. So from officers' point of view, we don't have any concerns with the request that's been raised to defer the application, but it's over to members to make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So we'll go on to item number 5. Is there anyone wanting to put a motion forward of any kind? Councillor Daniels.
Thank you, Chair. I propose we take the officer's advice and defer item 5 until we can come back to it.
Thank you.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Daniels. Councillor Smith.
Second, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, lads. Thank you very much.
Chair, if I can just come in on this before we go to a vote on this issue. I think Councillor Horsley may want to ask a question, unless he was trying to second that.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I was just trying to, I would have seconded that myself.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
Thank you,
fine.
Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. If officers don't have any further, members don't have any further queries, I'll over back to you, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, just before, Chair, forgive me, just for clarification, just for the purpose of the minute, what Councillor Daniels has put forward as the motion is reflecting the officer's verbal presentation today, that we require time to assess and hear the concerns of the applicant with regard to the proposed conditions that have been put forward as part of the report. So just for the clarification for the minute, that's what you will be voting on.
Thank you, Simon. So over to you, Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I if you just bear with me one moment. We have Councillor Kirkbride trying to get into the meeting. I'm just going to put over to the monitoring officer in relation to whether he'll be able to vote on this.
Apologies, has Councillor Kirkbride just joined?
Councillor Kirkbride has just joined the meeting now, Sharon, yes.
Right, so Councillor Kirkbride won't be able to vote on this matter, but can I suggest, Chair, instead of taking the vote by a roll call, unless there are any objections to the deferment, which can be made by the raising of a councillor's hand, that we take no objections as the consent of the meeting to defer the matter. So unless anyone raises their hands in objection to the deferment of the matter, which there isn't, Chair, I would take that as an approval by consent of the meeting to defer this matter for the reasons provided.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
So now do we go to item number 4, Lee?
Yes, Chair. Before we do that, can I just make sure that the speaker is on the meeting?
Thank you.
They may not have been expecting to be on the meeting at this time, so I'll just... Hello, Mrs. Cunningham.
Hello.
Hi there. Thank you for waiting there. What happened is the item before yours is now being deferred. So we're going to go on to the TPO item now. So you're in the meeting. I'll put you on mute and I'll come in when you're requested to speak. Okay?
Yeah, fine.
Thank you.
Thank
Chair,
you.
over to you to continue with the proceedings.
Right, we'll hand over.
Chair,
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I think the chair was on mute there, but I think he was passing it over to the officers. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. So the next item on the agenda, the only remaining item, is the tree preservation order application. Now, members may obviously kind of remember that this was considered by the members previously. So the application seeks the council consent to undertake works to 2 ash trees protected under tree preservation.
Sorry, Steve, can I just interrupt there? I just need to, for the clarity of the record here, that Councillor Daniel Horsley will be leaving the meeting for this item and he'll be speaking on the item. Just for the clarity of everyone watching there. So Daniel Horsley, for this item, he's not a member. He won't have a vote. He'll just be speaking on the item as a member of the public and will be removed from the meeting once he's finished his presentation. Okay, I just wanted to put that on record for clarity. Sorry, Steve.
No problem at all. Okay. So just a quick reminder to members that this application seeks the council consent to undertake works to two.
Steve, you've went on to mute.
Apologies. Yep. Right. Okay. So this application seeks the council's consent to undertake works to 2 ash trees protected under a tree preservation order at Hill Farm in Seaton. Officers highlight that this proposal and its grounds is totally separate from the details of a recent planning application for housing development, which was considered by the council at one of the previous panel meetings. Members may recollect the application was recently considered by the development panel, but deferred to explore whether pruning works would be an alternative option to address safety concerns from the neighbouring property. Further to a resurvey by the application, the details have been amended to crown thinning and pruning of tree T1 and the felling and replacement of T5 as outlined in the report. So just to provide members a quick reminder of what we actually kind of discussed previously, I'll just go and share some slides of the previous screen. Can members see the screen now? Yep. So members may recollect, this is the actual tree preservation order designation, and you can see that it's done as a group value. They're not individual trees, and so it's a group value, and you can see it's an L-shaped tree preservation order, and you can see the L-shape fronts onto Causeway Road. So therefore the trees are clearly prominent and visible within the street scene in Low Seaton. So moving on to the trees, apologies if the trees are a little bit faint. This shows the individual trees within that group designation. Now T1 is what would be the rightmost trees. It looks like half a tree on that plan at the very right hand side of the L. And T5 is the large circular one just near the corner, what would be on the southern boundary near the corner of the actual L shape. So we've got 2 ash trees amongst that group, and that's what the application relates to. So these are the particular trees in question. T1 is the one that's basically the left-hand side of those 2 trees. So you can see it's very proximity close to the boundary, and it has overhanging branches over the neighbouring tree. And then moving on to T5. T5 is the one with the ivy on. So you can see it's quite a large mature ash tree. And it also similarly has overhanging branches over what is the neighbouring property. And that kind of concludes the slideshow. Okay, so from a planning point of view, as stated previously, the TPO was applied to the site as a group designation due to its amenity value, especially given its contribution to the street scene. This amenity value is not disputed by officers. The original tree works application proposed the felling of 5 trees, but this was amended to the 2 on the grounds of ash dieback, which results in a safety hazard to the adjoining bungalow property. Further to the last development panel, when it was proposed to fell both trees, the trees have been resurveyed by a peer arboricultural consultant appointed by the council. A copy of her findings was sent to the development panel members. She concluded that there may be scope to crown thin and prune overhanging branches of T1, although it will need to be monitored in the future to assess its condition. The applicant has agreed to this alternative treatment and has amended the description accordingly. However, the safety remediation works required to T5 deriving from its current condition would alternatively result in a 4-metre stump. It is therefore considered on amenity value grounds, it would be better to replace this with a replacement heavy-duty standard trees. Now, the council's arboricultural consultant, Anthea Jones, is attending the meeting and will be able to clarify any points of concerns by members on health and condition of these particular 2 trees. Therefore, given the overall modifications arising from the resurvey, which have been accepted by the applicant, it is the officer's recommendation reflects the findings of a recent survey report supporting the crown thinning and pruning of T1 and the felling and replacement of T5. As I say, Anthea is attending the meeting, so if members do have any kind of arboricultural orientated questions, she would be pleased to answer any of those queries. Thank you.
Chair, you appear to be on mute. Would you like me to introduce the first speaker on this item?
If you would, please, Lee, everything was muted.
Right, thank you. We can hear you now, Chair. Mrs. Cunningham, I'm just going to ask you to unmute. When you're ready, you'll have 5 minutes to address the panel and provide your representation. So whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I was disappointed to hear from the last meeting that I was in favour of the trees being felled. All that I've asked for in the past was for the trees to be maintained in a safe and healthy way. I've had fallen branches on my drive where my car is parked through lack of maintenance. Mr. Copsey bought the property 4 years ago, and nothing. I've spoken to Allerdale Council on previous occasions about the maintenance of the trees, and nothing has happened. But all of a sudden now they need to be felled. It's never been my wish to see the trees felled, and I've never stated this to any council official. I spoke to the county council appointed agriculturalist who visited the site, and she explained to me that one ash tree had dieback, which could be remedied with appropriate attention. She also recommended that if in long term the trees succumb to the dieback, then another tree should be planted in its place. I assume this would be in her report to the county council. The existing preservation order on the trees should not, in my opinion, be reversed, as they have enhanced the area and the surrounding environment. I actually bought the property with the trees surrounding the property as it looked so attractive. I haven't really anything else to say on that matter other than, I'd be sad to see the trees go.
Thank you, Mrs. Cunningham. I'd ask you to wait a moment to see if anyone has any questions for you. Anyone would like to ask Mrs. Cunningham a question, please? Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Cunningham, sorry, I can't see you, but I guess you're still there.
Yes, I am.
The ash trees are very attractive, but they are very good at dropping branches and twigs the whole time, aren't they? I think it's not surprising that you do have twigs and branches on your drive. If it was to be felled, what sort of tree replacement would you prefer? Because ash trees are very messy, aren't they? They drop a lot of stuff all the time. Just wondering if you have a preference for a replacement, a different type of tree, or would you prefer an ash to match T?
No, I don't have any preference to an ash. I mean, if it was ideal, I would say an oak tree. But they're very nice. But I don't know if they're in preference to. I mean, in preference to a sycamore. The sycamores are already there and they seem robust. I don't know. But if ash trees are prone to dieback, then that's possibly a no there.
Yeah.
Thank
okay.
you.
Well, thanks for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions, please? I think we can go on to the next speaker if you can, Lee, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to, Mrs. Cunningham, thank you very much. I'm just going to remove you from the meeting.
Thank you.
The next speaker, Chair, speaking on behalf of Seaton Parish Council, is Councillor Daniel Horsley. Daniel, you'll have 5 minutes.
Oh, Councillor Daniel, sorry. By the way, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm going to read a letter out to you. It's been written by one of the nearby residents near to this location, and I wholeheartedly agree with it. So here we go. In response to the further tree survey dated March 2021 by Planning Branch Limited, following the development panel hearing on the 16th of the 2nd, 21. May we firstly say thank you to the panel for allowing one more opportunity to reassess the trees rather than simply pass withdrawal of the TPO, as these trees were all here before us and will remain here after us given the chance, which is within our ability to achieve. Planning Branch originally confirmed in September 2020 that both T1 and T5 should be removed on safety grounds. They have since revisited the site, reassessed these two trees and now advise that a canopy reduction on T1 may help keep the tree and reduce the risk of causes to tolerable with a 40% crown reduction and removal of hanging branches. This is very welcome news, and I and many others, including myself, would very much encourage the panel to consider this. Planning in modern times, stripping towns and villages matures, hedges and natural features, all of which provide extremely important ecological habits, as well as amenity value. So again, we need to save these trees if we can. The continual loss is not a sustainable position by any means. Every mature tree lost is one less oxygen generator, and replacements would take decades to reach the same capacity to do this important function. There's also no guarantee that replacements would be planted by the owner of the land, or the planners or development panel able to enforce this replanting. The potential loss of a T5, already a huge one, and any chance of retaining any of the more mature trees in our village should be not missed. Our legacy to the future should be one of conservation, not sacrifice. Going back to the start of the WTPO process in August 2020, the request was for 2 ash, T1, T5, and 3 sycamores, T6, T7, T8 to be felled. The original reasons was given as the trees were all compromised in one form or another. Subsequent independent assessment refuted this for the 3 sycamores, so hopefully we could confirm they can remain as well as at least one of the ash with suitable management applied. These trees, and indeed the property as a whole, have remained completely unmanaged for the time the present owners have had the property, which the previous speaker has highlighted there, allowing them to be in an unfortunate position they are in now. I remain confused, as I do myself, as to why the owners have allowed the decline as they have. They are farmers and as stewards of the land, which should try hard to conserve where they can. It's a thought here from the neighbours and that, and I agree with this. The trees that line the street in Cockermouth are heavily pollarded, and each year they come back and are still a beauty and a very much amenity value and are not lost to disease. Can this not be considered for both these trees, please? T5, which pollard will reduce, maybe even remove the risk failure and give roots a chance to re-establish sufficiently to provide a firm grounding for the tree. If pollard was not to allow the tree to be saved, then felling could be the final act of giving every chance available for it to be saved. While we are not experts on trees, we feel that the chance of survival of any living thing should be given with its own rights, if to do so, which in this case it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horsley. Can I ask you a question, Daniel?
Of course you can.
What we're looking for here is the health and safety and the welfare of the public. If these trees have a disease or a problem, and somebody's struck by a branch, somebody's got to be responsible. But it's so vague here. I'd like to ask Anthea Jones on Anthea, how long did you say these trees, there's 2 of them as ash dieback?
Chair, can I just, sorry to butt in. I think it'd be helpful if you addressed questions to Anthea Jones during the questions to officers.
Right, sorry about that.
If you complete the questions to Councillor Horsley, yeah. And then other members might have questions to Councillor Horsley, and then if there's any questions to Anthea Jones, they can be addressed through the questions to officers.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Just who's going to be responsible for anyone getting hurt, Daniel?
Thanks, Chair. If you can remind yourself back to the previous meeting, I'm sure it was said these trees are in no immediate, they're not going to drop over tomorrow. Yes, they've been identified, they have got disease in them, but the lifespan on them could be a very long time yet. It's not something that we're going to worry about, they're going to drop tomorrow. And the last weekend we've just had them horrendous winds and that. Well, the trees are still standing, they haven't moved. So I know my garden shed's moved, but them trees are still standing anyhow. But thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Daniel. Councillor Fairbrother, please.
Oh, good afternoon, Councillor Horsley. I'm not very happy with the suggestion in the letter about pollarding. I don't know whether an ash tree could actually be pollarded. I know what they mean about cockermouth, but that's because they're in a street, but a lot of the time they don't look very nice in the autumn and winter. I'm just wondering, perhaps I should say it for Anthea, but I can see what they want to keep the tree, but I don't think pollarding would be a very attractive option. I don't know what you think. That's my question.
Thanks, Councillor Fairbrother. Yeah, I can understand where you're coming from there. Myself, I'm not a tree expert, so it's maybe something you can ask the expert later on in the meeting. But as for the trees in Cockermouth Main Street, yeah, there's maybe that time of year they don't look particularly well, but when in summertime and that, I think they do. They are of amenity value, and it's representing something that's been there for a very long time. It's something you see in the old photographs, the old black and white photographs, you know, from the early 1900s and that. And it's the same with these trees. There's pictures of people who've got photographs of these trees in the old photographs from carnival days, 60, 80 years ago, whatever it is. So, you know, if we do, you know, if we can keep these trees and reduce them to a safe size, it's something still there that tree has stood there for a prominent time. And we're doing our best as people of this earth, you know, doing our best to try and save this tree, you know, let it live its life as long as it can. Because it is part of the fixtures and fittings.
Yeah, I do empathise. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. We'll go to Councillor Paul Scott. Have you dropped off? Are you?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Councillor Horsley answered my question in his speech. Sorry.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Councillor Daniels, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Horsley. If we were to retain these trees, would your council then do an annual or by every 2 years be prepared to do an annual tree survey to see that those trees were still viable, that they weren't a danger to the public? Would that be something that you would undertake?
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Daniels, for that question. As chair of the local councillors, Seaton Parish Council, I would definitely approve that. And I'm sure my fellow councillors, all 13 of them are present below me, with me. I think they'll be exactly the same. They'll feel the same as I do. That these trees, they've been here for a very long time, and we are trying to preserve them the best we can. So yes, we would. Yeah, the parish council would. Yeah, without a doubt.
Can I just ask one more question,
You
Chair?
can follow on, yes.
No, thank you, Councillor. The other question I have, if they were to be, now I know I'm from Keswick, we have a big park and trees come down. What we've done with several of our trees, if they have been felled, is use them, turn them into decorative things like squirrels, owls, so on and so forth. Would that be, if it came to that end, would that be something you might be interested in?
It's quite a difficult question to answer that, actually, because they're not our property. They're in private hands. It's on a private land, so I can't really answer that question.
Okay.
But if it was our trees and that did happen, something like that, yes, we definitely would. Yeah.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Councillor
Daniel.
Daniels.
Thanks.
Councillor
Thank
Smith, please. Alan? Councillor Smith? You're muted.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to inform the development panel for a matter of clarity, the trees on the main street are all limes. They aren't ash. They're a different species altogether, and they need pollarded every 3 or 4 years. It costs the council or the county council between £4,000 and £5,000 each time they cut them down. So yeah, they do look nice, but the wrong trees in the wrong place. I don't want to open up the debate regarding Cockermouth Main Street, but just the fact that they are a different species, the limes, they grow faster than the ones we talk about on the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Semple.
Thanks, Chair. And actually, Councillor Smith got in ahead of me just to clarify what the limes is, was one of the things I was going to do. But Councillor Horsley, so you obviously feel, and the parish council feels very strongly about the trees. Just give me an idea. Are these trees? Are they like? How long have they been part of the landscape? I mean, what do they add to the place?
Thank you, Councillor Semple, for that question. I can go back to maps of 1841, I think it was. It was more of what maps, it was like a council taxation map back in that day to see what was what. And the trees lineage on it are in exactly the same position as they are now. And going back to a previous question, we've seen photographs of the same trees similar in like sort of black and white photos from 80 years ago or the early 1900s, well over 100 years ago. The trees are in the same position, the same format that everybody in living memory has seen them as they are now. So they've been here before us, and with a little bit of help from us, will be here after us as well. They are part of what is Causeway Road, Low Seaton.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Semple. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Anyone, any more questions for Councillor Horsley, please? Thank you very much. And now we'll pass on to officers for questions to the officers, please. And now I would ask Anthea Jones as our...
Chair, you've got some questions.
All right. Anthea, if these trees have what you call ash dieback, is it detrimental to the tree, and in what way, please?
Yeah, how ash dieback works is it affects the cellular structure of the trees, so it then the resulting tree becomes brittle, and its stability is affected by that. Now, the extent of it spreading, it can slow down or it can speed up. The concern I have in relation to, and the reason my initial report confirmed the removal was because the trees are already under stress by the fact of the ash dieback. Tree 5 also has root plate movement. So you can go on site and you can look that the actual root plate is moving, is lifting. So that's another concern on T5. If you prune the trees to the extent that we need to prune them, then that creates additional stress as well. So coupled with I suppose it's just like a person. If a person's really ill and then another illness comes along, their immunity is low. So it's very similar with a tree, that the ash dieback has affected its immunity in effect and its stability. And so the actual pruning of it will cause extra concern. What I do want to sort of clarify is when I've done this secondary assessment, the first assessment is sort of a visual tree assessment, it's called. So whereas on the second one, I did what's called a QTRA assessment. So I'm a QTRA assessor as well, which is Quantified Tree Risk Analysis Assessor. And what you have to look at is you look at the size of the part of the tree that could potentially fail. And then you look at what is the target of, if that tree was to fail, that part of the tree was to fail, what's the target which it will hit? So we'll take tree 5. There's different targets that I've highlighted within the report of the actual house, and we looked at I had a really good conversation with the lady next door in the property, Mrs. Cunningham, I think it was, and I had a really good discussion as to where her rooms were, which rooms, because obviously the bedroom at the front, if T5 was to fail, it would fall onto her bedroom and she would be asleep, so wouldn't hear it and be able to move. So we looked at a QTRA assessment of what's the size. So I took measurements of the size, the part that would fail. And that's why that tree, in order to stop its failing, would need to bring it down to 4 meters. And even at that point, if it failed, it would still damage, it could potentially fall onto the car and with the root plate movement. And so even with T1, as you've seen from my previous reports, I don't like to see the loss of trees, which is why we managed to get T6 back into the TPO, even though it has a cavity, because I'm a firm believer that we should try to retain as many trees as possible. But having done the QTRA assessment, it is causing me concerns over the target of these trees and what they would impact on, as in a resident and their home. In relation to pollarding, I just want to comment that pollarding is a process that's carried out from a tree being of a juvenile age. So what happens is every time you cut back, the resulting sprouted new branches create a reasonably strong connection, but you couldn't pollard an old tree. It's topping it. It's not pollarding, because it won't be able to create the same attachments as what a pollarded tree like the cockermouth ones can do. So all that would do is create wounds, tree wounds, that aren't able to seal back up. So as well as the ash dieback, you were creating wounds that aren't able to seal. So you're actually putting extra stress on it if you were to top it and it's not pollarding. So even the 40% reduction, the reason I looked at the 40% reduction is because the target isn't so much the house, it's the garden. And you would hope that if the tree was to fail, it would be in, as Councillor Hodge mentioned, in sort of strong winds or excessive snow or something like that, some sort of load bearing on it. But what we do have to remember is trees are a living thing. They can be standing 1 minute, and I've looked at trees that I considered had a long lifespan, and then a freak weather and wind coming at the wrong direction, a different direction, and those trees have come down. So I think that's, I just wanted to sort of explain how the QTRA assessment works. So hopefully that's sort of answered some of the comments that have been made.
Thank you, Anthea. Councillor Lynch, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Anthea, for that very good explanation, because you've answered some of my questions there. But the one of them that I was going to answer, you say that you would replace T5 with a heavy duty standard tree. Now, can you explain to me what a heavy duty standard tree is and what sort of species you'll be thinking about here and recommending?
It's a heavy standard tree, not heavy duty, but it's a heavy standard tree. And you have different trees, from a whip, which is just often what you'll see on the side of the road, up to extra heavy standard trees. A heavy standard is approximately 3.5 meters in height. So you get that initial impact straight away. You often see them on housing estates. They often use either standard or heavy standards, so that you get a bit more of an immediate visual impact. So, and it has a girth of 12 to 14 centimeters, so they're quite a substantial tree. So that's the reason I suggested a heavy standard, so that you got that immediate impact. Obviously, none of us are going to sit here and say that we can have the same impact that those existing trees have, and if I could save them, we would. But so it'd be a heavy standard. In relation to species, we'd be looking at something that isn't going to cause any future problem for the property next door, and obviously it's long term. And so you could look at either an oak, like the lady said. An oak would work well, because as the other trees mature even more, the oak will grow up. So, and there's enough space in there, because that's what we've got to think about as well, is having enough space in the gap, that once that tree matures, because you see it all over the place. You can see all the highway trees that are getting felled because they've not left enough space for them, and now they've grown together. So we need to think future. So if you wanted something of a lighter tree, you could put a silver birch, which is going to be lighter and a smaller maturity tree than an oak, which is a large maturity tree. So there are options. And one option could be that we even put an additional tree up near T1 so that they, as tree T1 over time, because if the 5% reduction does stress it and it needs to come out, then we've already established a tree slightly further away from the neighbour's boundary already. So that's an option for you to think about, because when any one of them comes out, we need to at least put another one back.
Thank you, Anthea.
Yeah. Hope that answers that question.
Have you a follow-on, Councillor Lynch?
Just how long would it take, say, an oak or silver birch to get to, obviously not the height that we see here in the pictures, but much higher? How many years are we talking about?
We're looking at least 5 to 10 years before you get the immediate impact with the 3-metre tree, but obviously it's a small, but for it to fill out, you've got to think those trees are over 200 years old. So, and they are a girth of, up to 83 centimetres T5. So, whereas we're looking at planting one that has a girth of sort of 14 centimetres. So, yeah, so it's going to take some substantial years, but the only way for us to get some immediate is to plant the heavy standard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthea. Thank you, Councillor Lynch. Councillor Fairbrother.
I have to say I was going to ask more or less the same question as Councillor Lynch, but when you answered the question, Anthea, I was very pleased you said an oak, because an oak is a real substantial tree for the future, even though it might take longer to grow than a silver birch. And your idea about putting another tree in beside T1 should T1 fail. I think it was important you reminded us that the recommendation is that T5 is felled and T1 is pruned. I think people were talking as if they were both to be felled. So thanks for that answer, and maybe I'll ask later if we can make a recommendation for what sort of tree and if another ash can be put in beside T1, but I'll need to wait, I think, for that. So thanks, Anthea.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother.
Can I come back to that, please, Chair?
You can, Anthea.
Just in relation to the planting of the one at the front, the only reason I said that is that, say we managed to keep T1 for another 3 or 4 years, and it doesn't decline to an unsafe position, then it's just that if we did plant another one further into the site, if that was possible, just slightly into the site, so that could establish it over the next 3 to 4 years, and then the other could come down, and even to come down, there's nothing stopping, if it was needed to come down at some point, that it actually just comes down to a 3-metre trunk, so it becomes an eco biodiversity area, so that it's just a rotten stump. Or so we could look at that. I wouldn't suggest another ash as a replanted tree, because unless we are able to remove both T1 and T5 totally off the site, and there's also the possibility of the pathogen being within the soil. So to introduce another ash actually into the site area, I wouldn't recommend is a good idea, but there's nothing stopping 2 oaks being placed in that place, and then so that it could establish, and then the T1 would be, the new T1 would be further away from the boundary than the existing.
Thank you. I meant to say that. Of course, if you put another ash in, it'll probably just get ill again.
Councillor Daniels, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Anthea. While you were answering that question, my phone was ringing, both phones, which was so I didn't hear what I was going to ask you is, are you going to leave a stump for the sake of biodiversity? You've got ants and you've got mice, you've got all kinds of things that like to live in that kind of piece of stump which is dying. Is that, or are you taking the whole thing out?
I would suggest that if we were to, if the officers, if the members approve the 40% reduction, obviously that would be a tree that's left, and if that in future fails, then we could leave a stump there. I would be reluctant to leave much of a stump on T5 because of its root plate movement. you could leave a small stump, you could leave a stump of 1 or 2 meters, but what I would rather see there is to try and to keep a bit of a continuity of where the trees are planted. I would rather see for that one to actually be removed and a tree put back in a similar position. Whereas if we keep the tree T5 in its place, but just reduce down to a stump, then the newly planted tree will also have to be into this field, into the paddock area, rather than keeping that line of trees. So I would say that if we remove that tree fully for T5 and allowed a new tree to be back in a similar position, and then if in future T1 fails, even after the pruning, then that could be a tree that's further into the site, because it wouldn't have as much of a visual impact on that line of trees if that one was slightly further in. Whereas I think if you put T5 further in, it would have a bit of a visual impact because it would be going a bit like that. So but that's one of the reasons we kept tree T6 in, because of the large cavity and the biodiversity that creates, and it's a great habitat. So I'm all for keeping the stumps, but I think for that reason we'd remove T5 fully.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Can I ask, Chair, can I ask Steve a question?
Yes, Steve.
Thank you. Steve, just on the replacement of trees, is that actually enforceable? If we say we plant a tree, will the developer plant it, and can we enforce it if he doesn't?
Yes, Councillor. Yeah, obviously the members' resolution, you outline the criteria that you want, and that's the council's resolution. So they would have to kind of comply with whatever the members' resolution was. If there was a certain species members wanted, then we probably have to go back to the applicant and revisit just to seek their agreement to any other alternate type of species. But as I say, members' resolution, it would be enforceable. It would be it's quite regular that if you're felling TPO trees, there's a normal requirement that you're looking for something to replace the amenity value that we're losing. So it's quite standard practice that you're normally looking for replacement trees as part of any felling decision on protected trees. So certainly it would be enforceable and it will be binding as part of the decision.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Steve. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. It's just really, I mean, I'm no expert on trees, as you can probably tell, but we've heard there that the landowners had the land for over 4 years, and we've seen no maintenance on the other trees. We've also heard that the other trees within the group are stressed. What do we do with those other trees now? Are we going to wait another 4 years, maybe, until the developer comes and says that these trees are now in a state that they've got to come down, or are we able to put something on them now that states that we manage these trees as a manageable area?
Is that down to Anthea, Steve?
Anthea, sorry.
I can come back in. The actual other trees, although they considered that they weren't of a good quality when they originally put the TPO in, the TPO Works application, I didn't agree with their assessment of the sycamore trees. The sycamore trees, yes, they're not perfect specimens of sycamore trees, but that's why they've been a group TPO. There's minimal work that needs to be done to those, to be fair. The very little deadwood in them, yes, they're growing as a group, but personally I don't think that's a bad thing. We don't need to be making them separate. It's good that they're intertwined and they're good. Obviously, as part of the application, I know it's separate, but the planning application, then they're going to have to do some work to those, because the road's going to be near to there anyway. In relation to the fact they've had these 4 years, the ash dieback does work quickly. I manage a lot of woodland throughout the whole of Cumbria in my role as an agricultural consultant, and some of the trees that I've inspected 3-4 years ago haven't shown any signs, and now are showing signs. It's a bit like the larch disease. Once it takes hold, it does spread quite quickly, and in some it takes some time. But I think they're going to have to manage the trees anyway, and if because the TPO'd, we have control over what management happens to those.
Yeah.
but I think that you're going to see that there's going to be some management because of the result of the planning application anyway, the approval. But the other trees, in my opinion, aren't under stress. It's the ash trees that are showing stress because of the ash dieback. So just to make that clear, that the others, in my opinion, although the applicant considered they weren't of a good quality and were showing stress, I didn't agree with that comment from them. And I think that the remaining trees are of a good condition, other than obviously T6, which has a large cavity, but that can be managed to so that we keep that tree T6. So they are going to have to come in with some work to T6 because of the size of the canopy and the size of the cavity at the base of that tree. But that's obviously a separate application. But I would like to see the retention of T6, even if it was just for biodiversity gain in future. But yeah, so I think they're not totally unmanaged, but the ash trees have been, and I don't think there's a lot of work needed on the others.
So can I just say, I think it was Councillor Daniels who mentioned to Councillor Horsley about doing 2 yearly visits and assessments. Is that something we can insist with the other ones to ensure that they don't get into a bad state of repair? And it's part of it, as part of the TPO, they do assessment every 2 years to ensure they're up to standard and looked after.
As part of my suggestion, I would say that we have to, they're going to have to actually assess T1. If the officers, if the members grant consent of the 40% reduction, the owners are going to have to reassess T1 on an annual basis, because of the condition of the tree and the extent of work that we're proposing. We would not normally, as an agriculturalist, it made me cringe a little bit to suggest a 40% reduction, because it's like, oh, 30% is usually your top amount. So, but it was a balance between everyone wanting them retained. So they're going to have to actually come and assess them annually anyways, T1. So I would suggest that any competent agriculturists, when they came out to assess T1 as for the landowners, that they would look at the others anyway, because it's very difficult to go on a site as a tree specialist and see a problem on a tree and just go, no, I've only been asked to look at T1. I think professionally you couldn't do that. So I think generally, because they'll be looking at T1, they would more than likely look at the others, just even if it's just a cursory sort of look. But I can't imagine any tree specialist going on site and ignoring the other trees, even if they have just been told to look at T1.
Can I just say that, are we just going to allow them to possibly do that if they need to, or is there anything we do to ensure that the rest of the trees are monitored in a professional manner? You're on mute, sorry.
Sorry, say that again, my computer.
I was just saying, so do we just allow them to possibly maybe do that, or is there anything we put in place that enables them to manage them particular trees professionally and appropriately?
I think this is one for Steve as well. I suppose it's like Steve said with any resolution. If your resolution is to replant a certain tree and we have to go back to them, and also the resolution, I think, in order to ensure the safety of the neighbour, is that it's an annual inspection. It may be that you could say that you need to be looking at an annual inspection of the other, or even as part of the planning application, whether part of the landscaping scheme of the planning application, this is looking at a different way of doing it, is that as part of the landscape, the management of the trees could be part of that. That might be like conditioned as part of the landscaping, that those trees have to be managed. That might be another option, another alternative way to manage those trees.
Just highlight there's an added complication obviously clearly here, whereby it's certainly, I would say, the replacement of trees are normally kind of binding as part of the resolution. I've never seen anything whereby there's a management scheme required in respect of trees as part of a resolution on a tree works. So it's really whether the applicant would interpret that as reasonable or unreasonable. We've got the added complication whilst the parish have positively kind of suggested that they will be willing to kind of resurvey the trees. The trees, as highlighted earlier on, are in separate ownership. So it's something that's outside the control of the, for example, access from someone from the parish to actually get to that. And so the onus would really lie with the landowner, as with all tree preservation order trees. They're responsible for what is in effect a landscape asset on their land. Clearly, if something became dead, dying or dangerous, then it needs to be kind of reviewed from the council's point of view, and normally a formal request would have to kind of be put in. But as I say, the other aspect to that, which would be slightly, and also say this is totally divorced as a tree application, would highlight as part of the tree application, the housing application, there was a need for a biodiversity plan as part of that, and whether or not the tree conditions and the contribution to biodiversity could be explored as part and parcel of that and integrated as part and parcel of that scheme. So maybe it's something that could be upheld alternatively under that respective condition in the event of that permission being granted.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Paul. Councillor Daniels, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Steve answered my question. I was going to ask that same question. But yeah, it would be quite nice to bring that up when the housing plan comes up in front of us. So something to remember.
Thank you. What do we do now, Lee? Do we go to no more questions to officers? Do we go on to debate, or have we debated long enough?
Yeah, you can go into debate, Chair. Also, just for the record, Councillor Kirkbride has left the meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Semple.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just listening to everything. I mean, I was asking Councillor Horsley about the kind of character of the trees and the nature of it, and you know, I know that round in my part of Cockermouth, there's been a lot of tree pruning, and it does cause a lot of anxiety. But what I'm reassured about is the things that we can do to kind of future-proof and plan. You know, it's not like we're going to be completely, you know, stripping everything away, because it does concern me to we should be maintaining the character of our towns and villages. But I do feel, you know, reassured by a lot of the expert advice I've heard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Semple. Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. I was wanting to explore the idea that the recommendation has an amendment to say that subject to the owner's, the applicant's approval, that we ask for 2 replacement oaks, one for T5 and another one that may have to be the replacement for T1 in the future. I just thought that oaks were a really good recommendation because they're trees that last a long time and obviously not subject to ash dieback. And they're very stable and long-lasting trees. So I don't know whether that would be possible with other members' approval to make an amendment to that recommendation, should the applicant be happy with that idea.
I would second that idea.
Yeah. Councillor Lynch.
Yeah, I would second that idea from Councillor Fairbrother. My point was going to be that, yes, we're looking at the amenity value of the trees and we're trying to preserve that amenity value, but we also have a secondary consideration, and that is we have to look at the safety of the tree, the public neighbouring properties, and by reducing the crown of T1 and felling or not having tree T5, we are also fulfilling the safety aspect. And by the recommendations that we've looked at, where we're recommending a tree that's of a different type, stronger, and will grow reasonably quickly. I mean, 5 to 10 years in tree life, it's going to be a reasonable sized tree to add to the amenity. We're also looking at the biodiversity and things as well. And I think that what is here with the recommendation would be the way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Lynch. Councillor Daniels.
Sorry, Chair, just before Councillor Daniels, apologies, Councillor Daniels, apologies, Chair. Just a quick clarification, just as I'm understanding Councillor Fairbrother's motion and Councillor Lynch is seconding. And just so I get a clear understanding, I think the motion was to actually require the planting of 2 trees, but one was for direct replacement, which was an oak as direct replacement for a tree being proposed to be felled as part of this proposal. But the second tree, as far as Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, the second tree is to be retained as part of the proposal as it stands. Is that correct, Steve?
Yes, following the debate, Simon, my understanding was I think members were looking sympathetically towards the crown thinning and pruning works to T1. However, as Anthea was recommending, the suggestion was a replacement tree be planted in the immediate vicinity of the tree. So as and when T1, in circumstances where potentially it has to be felled in the future, we already have an established tree as part and parcel of that.
Okay, so we just need to be robust in terms of the timings of that and the clarity. So what it's clear to the applicant, who I don't think is actually, they might be watching on the live feed of this, that they are clear our reasoning behind this. So you're asking, so the motion put forward for clarity is a direct replacement oak tree for the tree being felled as part of the proposal, and then the additional tree to I'm trying to think of the word, to mitigate potential impact from a loss of the second tree in the future, that tree being subjected to works consented from this proposal. Is that correct, Steve?
That's correct. And just the added point from Councillor Fairbrother that should seek those replacement trees to be oak trees rather than ash trees, avoid any potential repetition of ash dieback.
Yeah, just for clarification for the minute, I just thought it'd be useful just to get that clear understanding.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Daniels, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure. Does Councillor Fairbrother have that proposal, motion that proposal? That, because if not, I would like to suggest we propose that we accept the officer's suggestions with the addition of Councillor Fairbrother's amendment to that, which is the planting of 2 oak trees as replacements. If I can propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. Have we a seconder for that?
Yeah, can we just go for the monitoring officer, please, for clarity first of all? Is that okay? Sharon?
Apologies, I'm experiencing difficulties. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can we, sorry. Can we just be clear of if there was an original motion on the table, Lee?
I was in the belief, yes. Simon, can you confirm that?
From Councillor Lynch?
No, the proposal.
Councillor Lynch seconded the proposal.
Yeah. There was a proposal, which is exactly the proposal that Councillor Daniels has just put forward from Councillor Fairbrother, which I seconded. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to get that clarified by the monitoring officer before we go into further amendments or motions.
Just a clarification for the monitoring officer, there wasn't a previous motion formally put forward. The first motion put forward was Councillor Fairbrother's, seconded by Councillor Lynch. The one thing I wanted to clarify was it wasn't replacement trees for both trees. It was a replacement tree for one tree and then an additional tree, given that there would be works approved to that second tree, and that additional tree was also further mitigation in the event that that tree to be retained but is lost in the future. So this, when you referred to Councillor Daniels in your comments to replacement trees, it's only one tree is actually replacing a tree, the other tree is actually an additional tree.
Thank you, Simon.
So you'll actually end up with 3 trees one of the retained trees and two oaks, if that makes sense.
Sorry, I was confused now.
Simon. Now, Councillor Fairbrother, were you proposing a motion as an amendment?
Well, I've had my hand up for quite a while. I was proposing a motion, but because we were still in debate, I threw in my idea for a motion. I was waiting for a debate, which we had. I would now like to formally propose a motion for these
Janet,
two.
1 minute, Janet.
Hang on a minute. Well, I need to explain what my motion is, surely.
No, Councillor Daniels is going to propose a motion.
No, I'm proposing my motion, which I'm just doing now. I think I should get the chance to do that.
Carry on.
Thank you.
Sorry,
my
can
motion
I just come in here because we just want to be clear whether there's actually a motion on the floor at the moment, and I think that's what the monitoring officer is trying to clear up.
Yeah.
I think Councillor Fairbrother was saying she didn't actually put a motion forward. She was putting a proposal forward for debate. So actually, there wasn't a formal motion on the table. Is that correct?
Well, it's correct in a sense. I just wanted to feel what people were thinking. And so, yes, I was going to try and put a formal motion once I'd heard what people thought about it. But I was also going to say that there is a policy for Allerdale to actually replace one tree with two trees. So I was going to make that part of the proposal. But if whatever other members think, if Councillor Daniels wants to put that on and it's the same as what I said, that's absolutely fine. But I did want to get my pennyworth in there because I felt as if I hadn't been able to add to my first comments.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother.
So does my motion stand still, Sharon, or is that where we are?
It's up to the chair to take the motion from the floor.
I would like to ask anybody on the floor for a motion, please. Not an amendment, I want a motion. Councillor Daniels.
I propose we accept the officer's report with the inclusion of a replacement tree and an extra tree to be planted on the site.
Thank you. Have you a seconder, please?
Can I just come in before that's seconded, Chair? Simon, have you got any comments on that motion put forward by Councillor Daniels as the only motion?
Just one query, Councillor Daniels. Were you specifying them to be oak trees or not in that motion?
I would specify they would be oak trees.
And both to be the I think the officer's report refers to a single, is it heavy standard? Forgive me, yeah, heavy standard. So both trees to be heavy standard oak trees.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Have we a seconder for Councillor Daniels' motion?
Councillor Fairbrother has a hand up.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Yes, I'm happy to second that motion. I think perhaps the wording should be something like, if the applicant agrees, because presumably if it's someone else's land and he doesn't want to put oak trees in there, do we have any power to say we want oak trees? I wasn't quite sure about that. Simon, are we able to specify the trees or just suggest?
I believe in law you can specify the tree. You certainly can't specify that it be on someone else's land. So it would have to be in land in the applicant's control.
Well, I would like to second that we recommend two oak trees, one to replace T5 and one to be near to T1. I think I've got that right.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Over to you, Lee. You can take a vote, please.
Well, just unless there's any further debate on that, Chair, and if Simon's happy.
Sorry, do we? Forgive me. Did we have a seconder?
Yes, we do have a seconder. Councillor Janet Fairbrother seconded it. Simon, yes.
Right, and Councillor Daniels proposed. Thank you. I do apologise, members.
Yeah, very confusing, Simon.
If it's okay with Simon and the monitoring officer as well, just a nod will be okay, Stern. Yeah. So okay. So members, if there's no further debate, which I believe there isn't, according to the raised hands, we'll go to the vote. Okay with you, Chair?
No problem, Lee. You fire away, lad.
Okay, members. So the motion was proposed and it's been seconded. We'll go through the list. Just for, against, or abstain. Councillor Armstrong.
For.
Councillor Daniels.
For.
Councillor Fairbrother,
4,
Councillor Granger,
4,
Councillor Lynch,
4,
Councillor Mumby,
4,
Councillor Semple,
4,
Councillor Scott,
4,
Councillor Smith,
4,
Councillor Tyson.
4.
Thank you. Chair, 10 in favour, no against, no non-abstentions. The motion's carried.
The motion carried, so that planning application WTPO stroke 2020 stroke 0023 is passed as per officer's recommendations to the conditions of the trees. So that's, I think that'll be it, is it, Lee?
Yeah, no further items on the agenda, Chair. It's over to you to close the meeting.
All right, thank you all for attending, and Anthea for your wise words, and everybody else, thank you very much for